the prediction of people having a major depressive episode, almost everyone is predicted at this point in their life, right? Which really doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, if everyone's expected to have some kind of debilitating, I mean, because it's not just a depressive episode, like a major depressive episode.
Yeah. So it kind of raises this historical question, like what happened that there's an explosion now?
Is it possible that this is not just a huge maladaptive function of the world, that we're all somehow headed down towards the end of times?
Oh no, maybe instead it's like this amazing birth of this weird, tweaked, fascinating soul thing that has never really fully emerged, but when it emerges, it comes out with a bang, and whoa.
Coming all the way from Minneapolis to Washington, D.C., we now bring you Enter the Freud.
I know this primary care doc who just has been working in hospitals and just kind of the normal front lines, and said that when she first started practicing medicine like 20 years ago, once a month, maybe a few times a year, someone would come in with like a psych emergency, suicidal or freaking out and need to be hospitalized, and it was a big deal. Now, 20 years later, like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times a week. So it's like gone up like hundreds of times in that 20 years.
Yeah.
So if there's this like exponential explosion of mental health crises going on in our country right now.
The anecdotal story of the primary care doc you're talking about is just like a representative statistical. I've been looking at those stats for a while, right? Like I was looking at that. I was impressed 10 years ago with those stats where the prediction of people having a major depressive episode, almost everyone is predicted at this point in their life, right? Which really doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, if everyone's expected to have some kind of debilitating, I mean, because it's not just a depressive episode, like a major depressive episode, then with anxiety, it's like at this point, it's estimated that 1 in 5 adults is currently having a clinical level of anxiety. Yeah. Like as we're living right now. Yeah. And in this room of us, it's probably me.
No. Me too.
It's like, yeah.
2 out of 3.
2 out of 3.
But so it kind of raises this historical question, like what happened that there's an explosion now? And it makes me think of what we were talking about yesterday about Burning Man, where it's like something has happened where like the madness in the human psyche is decided to like start bubbling up and like is emerging now and is just like coming onto the scene in like a full all out like explosion of madness. And sometimes it's beautiful and sometimes it's horrible and ugly, but it's happening.
Man, what about since you and I are in the front lines, right? So this is what we do all day.
Yes.
Is see people who come in with this actively coming out as, and you know, it also reminds me of just being trained in California and the idea of integrating it into your life instead of trying to just suppress it in that kind of a or viewing it as pathological, right? In trying to see the intelligence in this phenomenon.
Right, totally.
If we're going to acknowledge that it's a phenomenon, then what happens to this as like, is it possible that this is not just a huge maladaptive function of the world, that we're all somehow headed down towards the end of times? That's what
some people believe that. But honestly, when we're talking about back to the Burning Man thing, it's like, oh no, maybe instead it's like this amazing birth of this weird, tweaked, fascinating soul thing that has never really fully emerged, but when it emerges, it comes out with a bang, and whoa.
But then what are we supposed to say? Hey, guys, part of life, so we should teach our kids, right? Maybe we should tell our sons in advance, hey, by the way, you're going to have to go through this, and you're going to have to go through a period of time where you may not function well, And you're going to have to take time away from your life's project and the directionality of all things, all the expectations, the benchmarks you're supposed to hit. You may have to take some time and like just go tour Greece and just be part of another.
And go do Burning Man and take way too many drugs and get all rolling around in the dirt with other naked psychotic people. That's just part of life now these days.
I don't know. Seriously.
That's not what our grandparents were teaching their kids back in the good old farming days.
Hell no. Hell no. And now we're supposed to figure out, well, I mean, look, that I definitely play more of a humanistic role with my patients, trying to make sense of this and in a way create an acceptance. And I don't want to even get all weird about what kind of therapy is therapy, and because then we end up in that horrible discussion, right? But it's like that's what I end up doing, right? I'm in several discussions like that per day.
What discussions like what?
Discussions where we're trying to make sense of the awakening phenomenon of their reality is just riddled with suffering in a state of anxiety of the unknown. The inability to handle unknown comes in the form of anxiety, right? And then after that persists for longer than you would think is reasonable, then you're depressed. Right?
Yeah.
It's almost like formulaic.
Yeah.
I seriously could write it out almost as like, hey, with these elements in place, there it is.
Right. Whereas I think we're saying, instead, if it's okay to be totally lost and have no idea what the hell you're doing or what life is supposed to be or what's going on inside yourself, if that's okay, you don't have to become depressed. Now you're just lost.
But who is going to buy that? Right? Like, who's going to be okay with that? Because seriously, like, as a dad, like, there's no fucking way I would want to plan out and say, like, all right, little guy, this is how the world is, and you're going to have to be okay with that. Except I do kind of do that. I kind of...
Well, and if it's true, you kind of need to, like, be honest and prepare people for it.
Yeah, that would be really messed up as a parent to kind of tell your kid that, yeah, if you just played your cards
It's
right,
be all good.
you just, if you had the
You're
right...
a good little boy, life will go well.
Yeah.
Because you're probably doing with your patients the opposite. You're telling them, no, man, this is normal. This is what human life is like. This is normal.
That's exactly...
You're doing that with your patients. We got to do that with our kids.
That is what I do. I do that with myself, right? Like, I look at my own condition, and as it emerges, and I wasn't joking about being riddled with anxiety at times. There's like parts... I don't know how frequent it is, but some days I'll wake up and I will literally question, not only am this is when I know I've like gone too far, is sometimes I'll start thinking like, God, I don't even know if I'm a very good doctor. And then I'll think, well, what if I'm not even a good dad? And then I'll be like, well, what if I'm not even a good dog owner? Like, and then I know that's impossible. I'm like the best dog owner on the fucking planet.
That's the one thing you've really got figured out.
I have that nailed, right? Like, my dog lives the greatest life of all dogs that have ever lived. I'm quite certain of it, right? And then I wonder, like, okay, how normal is it to go through a period of that in-depth questioning?
Extremely normal.
But
it's abnormal to not go into that.
How frequently do you think, with the way that the world evolves, the way that culture keeps emerging in its like stages upon stages upon stages of uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
That keep it with, like, oh, now we have a virus. Oh, now we have a different virus. It's a mental virus. It's some kind of a thought distortion. Yes. Oh, people now believe in all these scary things.
Oh, now we live our lives in the Instagram world.
Yeah, and that is that genius. That's because that's what's really intelligent now, is those who are influencers on that thing, and you're like, what? So if I'm to be someone who is significant and intelligent, I better be someone who's an Instagram influencer, a TikTok influencer. Yeah. I better pretend to have an airplane.
If you don't have 100,000 followers, you're a loser.
I need to pretend to have a jet and a McLaren, otherwise I am, well, what am I? You're someone with a high IQ who has no traction. Yeah. That's literally, that's an idea. Like, I wonder how we're supposed to go. How are you supposed to then lead your own life and those moments of doubt that inevitably emerge, where you wake up and you're like, oh my God, I am not doing it right.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it right. And then what? I'm not working out enough. My nutrition isn't dialed in enough. My sleep is definitely disturbed. What's happening with my relationship? Do I have enough relationships? Well, of my relationships, should I get rid of the right? Which have I gotten rid of the right ones over time? Over time, which friends did I keep? Did I keep the wrong friends? Uh-oh.
Ah!
Yeah, it's like an endless peril of questioning, doubt, and then go back to you create a formula, and then that formula lasts for how long, right?
Yeah.
How long? Past your midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Then what?
The formulas have to change.
Yeah. And then it's like trying to figure out, how should we posture ourselves as what is the posture of the middle-aged white man, or middle-aged man, or middle-aged human being? Mm-hmm. How should one posture
Or
oneself?
just, well, how do you posture yourself as a human?
What about a teenager? How are you supposed to posture yourself as a teenager
Walk
today?
through a high school and you just see all of them like intensely, terrifiedly preoccupied with that question, and none of them have it figured out.
With a massive perceived audience
Yes.
of everyone's looking and no one's looking.
No,
They're
totally.
all into them.
Oh, like, am I posturing right?
Yeah, you ever see people when they're cruising along and it's painful to see them walk?
Yes.
You can see the perceived audience that they're like literally an externalized machine, which I take pride in the way that I walk, actually. Sometimes I intentionally walk. Like, I have a thing that I do, and and I've been working on that since I was a kid, right? I've been working on it. And one time I was cruising along, and I was looking at my son, and he was walking like this little gorilla. And I was like looking at him like, what the fuck is he doing? And I looked at myself, and there I was, like, dun, dun, like,
Oh, daddy and son gorilla.
and I was like, yeah, I got that, right? But I didn't feel pain about it, right? Mm-hmm. And it was like, and when I noticed my son doing it, we were both going through this heavily, like super crowded area, right? So there were we were looking at a lot of people were looking at us. But then, like, I don't know what it is. Like, sometimes I'll be at a stoplight and I watch people going, and I'm the first one at the stoplight, and the people walking across in front of me, I can just see the pain.
Yes, just the pain of moving through the world.
I can't believe you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely, I see the same thing.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that when you've truly embodied the anxiety and disturbance of not knowing what the hell to do on that fundamental, like on the most primitive level of, I don't know how to stand.
Totally.
I don't even know how to sit.
Yes. And everyone can see it, and oh no, and how can I hide? But I can't hide, I have to keep moving.
How long have I been sitting like this with my leg crossed? Like,
All right, dude, we gotta take you to the airport.
oh, dude, that was awesome.